lecture that we have about the first two commandments of the Mosaic law. We have with us today our dear friend, um, really quite a son to myself. It's Álvaro Mordechai. That he's a Spiritist speaker with talks based on his studies of the Old Testament. He speaks fluently Hebrew, amongst other languages, and studied and learned Jewish laws and customs through years of living in Jerusalem. He aims to combine the knowledge of the interpretation of the Bible's sacred texts through the wisdom of the Jewish people with the gospel of Jesus under the light of Spiritism. He gives lectures and conferences in Brazil and abroad. Álvaro Mordechai is also a promoter and coordinator of group trips of the humanitarian organization Fraternity Without Borders. So Álvaro has been very active in disseminating Spiritism, in sharing with us all his knowledge about the Old Testament, the Hebraic laws. So today, before we start, we are going to have our prayer, our opening prayer, but we would like also to wish you all a good Easter with your family, even if you are at home like all of us are. Enjoy this time of the year and let us be reminded of Jesus. This is why we celebrate our Easter. So without further ado, let's start our prayer, asking the good spirits to help us in this endeavor of disseminating the lessons that it's going to enlighten our spirits, praying that each and every home may receive the visit of the benefactors, and that our guest speaker today, Álvaro, may be guided, enlightened, and may we learn from him and from the lessons he's going to be sharing with us today. Thank you. Okay, Álvaro, now it's with you.
It's a huge pleasure to be here. I know we are a few thousand miles distance, but I'm sure that our hearts are connected in the same meanings, in the same purpose with the Spiritism and learning the Jesus gospel. To start our lecture, first I would start reading a very small part of the gospel according to the Spiritism. In the introduction, where Kardec say to us many points of the gospel, the Bible, and in the writings of the sacred authors are in general unintelligible. Some even appear absurd for lack of a key, which would help in understanding their true meaning. This key is to be found entirely within Spiritism, as those who have made a seriously studied can be convinced, as many more in the future will also come to recognize. Spiritism may be found everywhere in ancient times and every epoch of humanity. We find its vestiges in many places in the form of writings, beliefs, and monuments. This is the reason why, at the same time, it opening new horizons for the future, it's also projecting a no less brilliant light upon the mysteries of the past. So today we're going to talk about the first two commandments of Moses, but by the light of the Spiritism. The idea is that we are going to try to take out the spirit from the letters. And as we know by the psychology, we understand that to go on and to build a new future, we must be in peace with our past. And Emmanuel says to us that we are building a new Christian mentality for a new era. In this way, we must be in peace with the Old Testament, the Gospels, and the understanding all these texts that became unintelligible for a long time. To understand or to start, before starting actually the first two commandments, let's understand that these commandments were written in the book of Exodus. And in this book, we have many symbols. We understand that we have history written, but we want to catch the spiritual meaning of the words. So each and every time we are talking about Egypt, we must understand as a symbol. We are not exactly saying about a place, about some physical place, but Egypt in Hebrew, it's written Mitzrayim, comes from Metzar. Metzar is the meaning of being confined, being restricted, to become a slave. And in this way, we understand that every time we are going to talk about Egypt, we are talking about becoming slaves of our human passions. When we are going to talk about desert, it's a place after Egypt. Usually, when we get slaves, when we became slaves of our human passions, after that, we go to the desert. We see in the Gospels and we see in the Old Testament. So it means that you go to a place that no more the physical world, it's interesting for you. You want to get in touch with God. It's an introspection to yourself to understand what is happening with you. When we talk about Moses, we are talking about someone that comes to bring our conscience once again in our lives. The 10 plagues we understand very generally as the law of cause and effect. So after, and the Egyptian people, we understand not actually as the Egyptian people itself, the ancient Egyptian people, but something that lives inside each and every one of us. So the Jewish people, the Israeli people are living inside each and every one of us. The Egyptian people also living inside of us. The Israeli or the Jewish people, it's the inner will to get connected to God. It's like a tree that always grows in the direction of the sun. Our spirit, it has this will to get connected, to get closer to God. So when we talk about the Jewish people, we talk about this inner will. When we are talking about the Egyptian people, it's the will of getting connected with the physical world, the material world. So it's written that the Jewish people were slaves for 400 years. If we are trying to extract an understanding that it's for our days, that we can read this text with few thousand years ago, and we can understand that the purpose is to bring to our days. So we understand that the Jewish people were slaves. We were, or maybe we still are, slaves of our human passions. 400 years, it's the time that you have many incarnations with all this movement, with all this slavery of your soul, with your soul in your own Egypt, not a land itself. So, before receiving the 10 commandments, the Jewish people were going out from Egypt and went running away from the army of Pharaoh, that it's the representation of all this material world. It's the personal representation of all this material, this physical attraction that brings to our lives the physical world. So the Jewish people was running for the desert, was running to introspection. And for 7 days, the Jewish people were running away from the army of the Pharaoh. In this moment, we will find an interesting point where the Jewish people come to the border of the Red Sea. When the Jewish people comes to the border of this Red Sea, they look behind and they see the army of the Pharaoh coming to take them again to Egypt. And in front of them, a huge obstacle, a huge sea, the Red Sea as an obstacle. So it's a moment that all of us can find in our history, in our lives, when you get to a point where if you go back, you find a huge problem. To go on, you must solve this obstacle. You must understand what's this obstacle. So it says that when the Jewish people came to this point, they divided them in 4 groups that we understand. That are 4 groups that might live in each and every one of us. Not exactly all of us, but some of us. So when the Jewish people divide them, one of the group, the first group said, okay, let's throw ourselves to the sea. Let's kill ourselves. And we know that this is not a solution for any problem, for any obstacle we have in life, for any vicissitude we have. Killing yourself as a solution. We know that our spirit is eternal, and everything we do, we must confront this in the future according to the law of cause and effect. Of course, Moses would not support this group. So the second group, let's go back to Egypt. Let's surrender ourselves to the Egyptian. Let's go back and let's become slaves once again in Egypt. Of course, giving yourself to an old problem because you have an obstacle, it's not a solution. So Moses would not support them. The third group, let's make war. Let's fight against the Egyptian army and let's kill them. Of course, aggressivity, it's not a solution for any kind of problems. Diplomacy requires intelligence, emotional intelligence, and intelligence is intelligence itself. So fighting, it's not a solution. Moses would not support. And a fourth group would say, let's pray. Let's just pray. And of course, praying, it's very important in our lives. When we have a vicissitude, we have a problem, to get connected to God, it's very important. But it can bring you solutions. But you must work hard. You must work after praying. And this group said, let's just pray. We understand that Moses would not accept this advice. So Moses tell to the Jewish people, let's stand strong. Don't be afraid. Today you see the Egyptian. Tomorrow you will not see them anymore. According to what the rabbis understand, he says this because once you confront an obstacle, a problem, with a reasonable way, with faith, getting yourself connected with God, but thinking and working hard, this problem will not come to your life again. This becomes an attribute of your spirit by the knowledge you acquire from this. So in this moment, it said that there was a man. His name was Narshon ben Aminadav. Narshon, the son of Aminadav. And this man, he was praying very strongly for God, and he was connected to God, and he decides to go in the Red Sea. Many of the Jewish people that were very strongly, very connected to God, and they were praying, they follow Narshon ben Aminadav. And when Narshon ben Aminadav was with the water in his neck, the Red Sea would split. It would split and the Jewish people would pass through the Red Sea. Each and every Jew would reach to the other border of the Red Sea, and the Egyptian army couldn't pass. And it's interesting because we find 4 groups here. And we see in the book, Green Signal, chapter 20, from André Luiz, that he will give 4 advices in the chapter that he calls obstacle. First, advice of André Luiz: when you face an obstacle, you must go on. You will disappoint people, and people will disappoint you, but never exalt yourself. Be courageous. You must have courage, and you have to work hard. Second advice: don't accommodate yourself. After one difficult, you will find another difficult. But from each and every mistake you commit in life, you must learn the way you should go. You should learn from your mistakes. Third advice: be patient. Every journey is made step by step. You must go on, work hard, but you should wait for the time of God. You should, in the fourth advice, you should work hard and you should plant good in each and every person, in each and every moment, in each and every place of your life. But you should be patient and wait for God's time. We said that all the Jewish people crossed the Red Sea, and from this, we understand that there is no suffering, there is no pain, there is no difficulty, that it's eternal. Everything passes, every problem, every pain is going to pass through your life. But there's a difference, because part of the Jews came to the other side of the Red Sea with their clothes wet, and to go wet through the Red Sea, to come to the other border with your clothes wet, it means that you sweat by working hard. But the water also has a symbolic meaning in the Old Testament of purification. Also in the Gospels, it's always related to purification. So when you go through an obstacle, a vicissitude, a problem, and you work hard, you sweat, and you learn from this, you get to the other side with your clothes wet. You acquire this experience for your spirit as an attribute. So, in this way, the Jewish people would reach to the other border, and they would walk for another 33 days in the desert. After 33 days, they're going to stand in the feet of Mount Sinai. And Moses would go up in the Mount Sinai for 40 days, and he would receive the 10 commandments. We see in the 10 commandments a mediumistic phenomena of many mediumistic phenomena as direct writings, direct voices, materialization, and many mediunic phenomena. After he comes down on the 40th day, when he goes down, he will see the Jewish people adoring the golden calf. So we see here many representations. Each and every time, we see in the Gospels, in the Old Testaments, that someone climbs a mountain, it means that he's getting connected to God. When we see the Sermon of the Mountain, Jesus goes up according to the Matthew Gospels. If we see Luke Gospels, he's saying that he went down, because for Jesus, there is no need to go up in a mountain to get connected to God. As André Luiz says to us, that he's in very strong, that we cannot explain how he's so much connected to God. This is the words of André Luiz. So we understand that for the rest of us, to climb a mountain, to go up in a mountain, is to get connected. So Moses was connected to God. So when he go down, he was in a material world, and he was very angry, because he find the Jewish people adoring the golden calf. So he broke the two stone plates. These two stones were written the Ten Commandments, and he had to go up once again. We understand from this passage as a very important passage to understand the temptation of Jesus in the desert, because Jesus was also for 40 days in the desert. Before starting his service with the word, his serving in the word, he was baptized by John, and after this, he goes to the desert for 40 days. It is written that he was tempted by evil. And Kardec brings to us in the book of Genesis that this is a symbolic way. But what's this symbol? The symbol, it's the same symbol that it was brought in the Old Testament in this passage, that Moses go up and he gets angry. Even when we are connected to God, even when we are serving God in our lives, we get tempted. Jesus was not tempted, but we get the temptation of the material world, not evil, because we know that this is a symbolic way, a symbolic meaning. 40 days always means a time that you prepare yourself for a mission, for a trial, for an expiation. It's a preparation for your life. All of us stays 40 weeks on the belly of our mothers as a symbol, 40, preparation for this world of trials and expiation. So we understand that we are talking about the fragility of us, of the human being, the fragility that we find in the attraction with the material. After Moses goes up on the second time, this time he would bring the Ten Commandments and he would read it for the Jewish people. And first of all, I will read it in Hebrew because all my life I studied in Hebrew. So when I read, I find more deep meaning in the Hebrew words and the philosophy that it brings. And the first commandment is Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hoseti etcha mieretz Mitzrayim mibeit avadim. I am the Lord, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And each and every time we are studying, we must ask questions about the text. We must ask ourselves why it's written like that and not in another way. So why it's written that I'm your God that brought you out from the house of slavery, from the house of Egypt, and it's not written I'm your God that created heavens and earth, the universe. Why it's not written that it's more strong? It has a deeper meaning. It looks that it's a huger God, although it's the same God. But why it's written like this? First answer, we must understand that 4.5 billion years ago, when God created Earth, we are not viewers of this moment. 14 billion years ago, when God created the universe, we are not viewers. We are not spectators of these moments. But when the Jewish people went out from the house of slavery in Egypt, all the Jewish people saw the nature combining itself to get them free. It's what people call miracle. When all the nature gets so strongly manifested by God that we see him and nobody can deny it. So that's a miracle. We understand that it's a symbolic way, a symbolic word, miracle. So the Jewish people saw the strong hands, let's say, of God taking them out of Egypt. The second answer When Moses went to the Jewish people, say, okay, I'm going to guide you out of Egypt. They said, no, it's going to cause a lot of troubles, a lot of problems. The Pharaoh and his arm, they are so strong. Let's, take it easy, Moses. They didn't want to go out. After some moment, they went out from Egypt. When they come to the desert, they say, okay, Moses, now we have many wild animals. We don't have water. We don't have food. We are going to die in the desert. Before we were just slaves. Now we are going to die. It's your fault. When they reach to the Red Sea, they said, okay, let's split. Let's divide ourselves in 4 groups and let's go against God's idea. So we see that they were rebels with God. And it doesn't matter how much rebel, how much difficult you make to God. God is conspiring all the universe to touch your heart. And he's going to take you out from your own Egypt, from your own human passions. You're going to be free someday. You have your free will, and you can wait, and he's waiting for your time. But he's conspiring with his laws, all the nature, all the universe to touch your heart. God would not reject medicine for the sick ones. And the Jewish people were sick at that moment. So God, this is the second answer. So why it's written that God that took you out from the house of slavery in Egypt. We see another interesting thing. It's written, Anohi Adonai Elohecha hotzeti etcha, who took you but not in the plural. In Hebrew, it's written in the singular because of this, because God is taking care of each and every one of us individually. So it's not written hotzeti etchem in the plural, you in the singular way. It's written in Hebrew. So, another question. What's the purpose of commanding someone to believe? If I go to all the politicians in the world and I say to them, okay, now you must believe in peace. Don't believe in war. They are not agree with that. When we see the first Christians in the first centuries of the Christianism, they were commanded by the Roman Empire to believe in the Roman Empire, but they served God. They believed in the Gospels. So what's the meaning of commanding someone to believe? You cannot command someone to believe. So the commandment is to see God. You must see God. And Paul of Tarsus says to us that evoluting your spirit is taking the scales out from your eyes to see God. The commandment, you should see God every moment, every place, in every situation of your life. It's not to believe, but it's to see God. We see the first Hebrew, Abraham, he brings the monotheism. Moses, in his first book, Genesis, his first versicle says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the beginning, God created heavens and earth. So if God created, he was before the beginning. It means that he's one. Moses is also bringing as the basis of all the Old Testament, the monotheism. When we see the 4 Gospels, we see all of them starting with reference of one God. And when we see Kardec, in the first question, he's answering, the spirits are answering, God is the supreme intelligent first cause of all things. He's also bring the monotheism. So we must understand that monotheism is not just the basis, but it's the pillar that will hold the rooftop, that is the regeneration of our spirits. Another interesting question, we find the first word that it was written on the stones in the first commandment, Anohi. Anohi Adonai Elohecha. What's Anohi in Hebrew? It's not Hebrew. It's the language of the ancient Egyptian people. So why? After 400 years of slavery, God would write the first word of the 10 commandments in their language. After all the suffering, after all the pain, after all the difficulties. Why would God written like this? So here we find the German of forgiveness. You must forgive them. Because God, it's God for all the universe. And He loves you as much as He loves your enemies, the Egyptian people in that time. So we understand that the 10 commandments, they were not just given to the Jewish people, and it was given for all the humanity. And in the same way that it's starting a new era for the humanity, also Jesus, when he was in the passage of the temptation of Jesus in the desert, it's also the beginning of a new era for the humanity. We see this, it's written like as a continuation. Second commandment of God. Lo yelecha Elohim acherim al panai. You shall not have other gods before me. God, like idols with minor G. It's not God itself. You should not make any other gods. Put any other gods in front of God, the creator of heavens and earth, the creator of the universe. So we immediately understand that it's saying that you should not make any idol of clay, of wood, of gold, any metal, wood, whatever. But it's not just exactly this. We have to go to a deeper understanding. So let's understand, each and every time that you serve a human passion, you are actually adoring, you're putting an idol in front of God. So if you don't forgive your brother, your sister, your mother, your brother of humanity, someone, if you don't forgive him, you are putting all your pride in a not good way. You're putting your pride not in a nice contest, pride, but in a bad contest. You're putting your pride as an idol in front of God, and you are not forgiving others because you are adoring your pride. If you don't see humanity as brothers and sisters, you are putting your egoism as an idol in front of God. So for each and every human passion you have, when we serve it, we are putting it in front of God, and we are not recognizing Him and His laws as supreme. So this is a deeper meaning for this commandment. And it's written like this: when the Messiah, Mashiach, will come, so in the earth all the idols will be vanished. Okay, and you say to me, but Jesus has already come, the Messiah has already come. But did you accept him in the land of your heart? Did you accept the kingdom of heaven in your heart? So when you will accept his laws, his understanding, his meanings in the land of your heart, then all the idols will be vanished from the world, from the land of your heart. And it's written that when you will vanish all the idols of your heart, then you're gonna serve God with all your heart, with all your inner strength. And this reminds us a very famous passage of the Gospels, that it's the passage where the doctor of the law, the Pharisee, he asks Jesus, what should I do to have a comfort place in the future life? What should I do to achieve the kingdom of heaven? And Jesus asks him, what do you understand? And he says, ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. You should love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. So, to love God with all your heart, it means that you've vanished all the idols of your heart. You vanished all the bad inclinations. So you just serve God in your heart. Bekol nafsheha, with all your soul. It means nefesh, nafsheha, your soul. Nefesh, it's an incarnated spirit. So it's someone that is alive, even if it costs your soul. As we see, the first Christians in the first centuries, that they were giving their lives, their souls, in sacrifice to God, and with all your strength. In Hebrew, with meodecha. Meod means much. With all your possessions, with everything you have. But then immediately we're thinking that it's just talking about what we have in the physical world, in the material world, like our goods, our money, and that stuff. But it's not just this. With all your much, with everything you have, it means with your words, with your hands, with your thoughts, with everything you have in your life, with all your money, not by spreading it by the poor people, but if you are a businessman, you should be a businessman that serves God even when you are working, in each and every moment. And we see Francisco Cândido Xavier, Chico Xavier, he served God with all his soul, with all his heart, with all his possessions. Francisco de Assis, Kardec, with all his intellectual attributes, that it's also a possession he had. And in this way, we understand what Paul of Tarsus wanted to tell us when he wrote in the letter to Corinthians, in the chapter 13, verse 3, I give all my possessions to the poor, and I give over my body to hardship, that I may boast, but do I not have love, I gain nothing. If you give your possessions, but you still adoring the idols of your heart, you did nothing. If you give your soul, but you still serving not God itself, but the idols of the human passions, you did nothing. You gain nothing. And after that, the Dr. Pharisee says, you will love others like you love yourself. And by this understanding of the first two commandments, we understand once again what Paul of Tarsus wanted to tell us when he said, love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it's not proud, it does not dishonor others, it's not self-seeking, it's not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs, loves, does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It's always protect, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails, because if you're loving, according to the laws of God, if you're serving only the Creator of heaven and earth, then you understand what Jesus said to us in the Last Supper. You should love each and every one of the humanity as I loved you. He just served with all his heart, with all his soul, with all his strength. God, the only God. It's interesting that in this parable of the Good Samaritan, where it's written, these two, these two things that the doctor of the law said, we see this of being not a knowledge for the doctor of the law. The understanding, okay, but the knowledge of these two versicles, it's known by each and every Jew in the world. Why? Because according to the Jewish law, you should recite it, you should pray to God saying these words at least 2 times a day, in the morning and in the evening, at night, before sleeping. You should say this passage 2 times a day. So each and every Jew knew about that. But in the continuation of that, there is something that it's also very interesting to learn at this moment. That it's written, after doing these two things, loving God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, you should love others like yourself. It's written, then you will tie as a symbol in your hands, and you will bind them in your head, and you will put in your doors as a frame in each door of your house and each gate of your house. So it's written that you should take these commandments as a signal in your arm, in your head, in your tongue, in your door. And the Jewish people in New York, probably you had seen many times mezuzah, in the doors of the Jewish houses. We put some scrolls, something written. This we learn from this commandment. You should probably also have seen the Jewish people in Israel or in New York, wherever, praying with a black box tied in the head, a black box tied in the arm, and praying, making a sign in the words. So this is the real meaning when we see that Jesus explains this for us in the crucifixion, because he took in his head as a crown of spikes that is a symbol of serving all the humanity. He served, he was the king of serving. And he also makes these marks in his hands when he's attached with nails in his hand, as a signal that even it costs suffering, he will be there for all the humanity. And he will stand his hands with the marks of serving God. And in his language, in his tongue, when he said, God, forgive them, they don't know what they are doing. And also in the gates, in the doors, as a mark, because it doesn't matter from where you come from, what you did, if you're bad, if you're wrong, where you are going, the house of Jesus will be always open to serve you, that you're gonna learn from his teachings, the most deeper way of loving with all your strength, with all your heart, with all your soul. So this is the lecture for today. This is what I brought in this Sunday, that we are in Eastern. So this is my words for you today.
Thank you so much, Alvaro. That was great. I have to tell everyone that this is the first time that Alvaro is giving a talk in English, so which is extraordinary, and you did a wonderful job. And you brought some very interesting material for us to meditate, to things that are not, of course, things that people know quite well. So the details and everything about this passage from Moses and all the four ways, etc., is not something that many people are aware about. But if you don't mind, Alvaro, I'm sure that there are people wondering about your upbringing and what has led you to Spiritism. I met Alvaro, I think, a bit more than 3 years since something ago. And immediately I felt a connection with him, and we had very nice conversations and exchange of ideas. But at that time, you were already researching and studying a lot, trying to make all these connections between Spiritism and the Old Testament. Can you tell a little bit about your journey into this path?
Yeah. I I was in Israel many years, and now as I learned the Judaism as a religion, and in some point of my life, I have been always medium, but in some point of my life, I had a very strong call used the spirits used my mediunity to call me
Mhm.
to the spiritism. So my mother gave me a book, the medium's book, and I read it, and I was 100% sure that there was spirits. I already known. I already know this. So I wanted to understand what was happening with me. And from this day on, I started studying, and I had studied maybe for 15, 20 years, nowadays much more, the Old Testament. So all this knowledge, it helps me to understand the philosophy of the Spiritism, because mainly we are studying questions of the book of the Spiritism, that it's very good, but we are not asking all these questions, because maybe all of our lives we looked at the first two commandments of Moses, and we couldn't expect that we could learn so much, and we could understand the Gospels of Jesus, and so much we can get it richer on understanding. So I try to make all this connection. The first years, I didn't saw all this work to do. I was just studying Spiritism, and I left it behind and said, okay, it's a new era for my life. It's a new moment. Now I'm Spiritist, so I will not read it anymore. But then I met some good friends that they study the Old Testament. They are speakers also of the Spiritism, and they said, no, don't throw it away. You have to talk about this for people. It's very difficult to understand some places, and for you it's easier. You should learn how to put this by the light of the Spiritism. And this is the most difficult thing, because to understand by the light of the Spiritism, it takes many, many, many hours of studying and thinking. And of course, we accept the help of the spirits and the friends and our friends.
Yeah, but that's amazing. Are you working in any kind of a project in particular that, in this researches that you do at the moment?
Yeah, I'm trying to accomplish all the book of Exodus. Haroldo Dutra Dias, he did the book of Genesis and Leviticus. and yet we have another 3 books. So I started by the book of Exodus. Maybe they did 1/3 of the book. The 10 plagues, it's also amazing. It's something extraordinary according by the light of the Spiritism, and so many passages, but mainly I'm working in the book of Exodus, and I'm working also in many passages of the Gospels that we don't see many people talking.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, we had a lot of comments that they actually thought you did a wonderful job and they are asking for more. So wait for more invitations to talk to us. It's great, Alvaro, what you have been doing, and I'm really happy that you have accepted to do this work for us. I know how hard it is for us to speak in in a language that is not our native language, and especially for you that has not been having the practice of doing that for a while, because you still live in Brazil. So, but it is very important for us to have all this kind of contribution. And like I was saying before, to be able to understand, to go deeper into the knowledge and understanding of Spiritism with a sense of, what we have in the old books is very important as well, because I see it very much like, a construction, a building, and definitely everything that we receive from the ancient text is the base, the foundation of everything. And without quite understanding or having at least a bit of knowledge of this foundation, how can we is start to comprehend what comes after? So that's why it is so important, this kind of work that you do, this research. I'm sure that you were picked by the Spirit. Okay, I think this guy here he's ready to do that, and you had to take your journey starting from a different path. Like many of us, you had to have your disturbances in terms of mediumistic things happening around you that had to call your attention somehow. Otherwise, you would be in your good teenager life, right? When you started, you were basically, you were a teenager, and now you are giving all this contribution. Sincerely, I hope that you will be able to continue with each time more bringing this kind of enlightenment to us. And for everyone that has not met Alvaro before, Alvaro lives in Brazil. He has been dedicating himself to put together this knowledge in Spiritism with Judaism, all the knowledge that he had from his upbringing. And we are actually going to reap a lot of benefits from that in terms of disconnection and understanding each time more. And people are saying that they are very thankful for all the enlightenment you brought for us today. And would you like to say any final words to us before we close our meeting today, our transmission?
I appreciate the opportunity of being here, although my English it's not so good, but I appreciate, and I hope you really could understand what I told, because I was feeling like it was my first lecture. So thank you very much
No,
for the opportunity.
wonderful, but it was really good, and we could see how well prepared. Like from what I know of you, you are always very well prepared. You do your job, you prepare yourself, and then the spirits, the benefactors, always come to help. And this is going to be, in our YouTube channel for people to see, for you to look afterwards. And I'm sure you're going to feel proud of what you have achieved and the message that you has brought to us. And like I said, I hope this is just the beginning in terms of you being capable or willing to talk to the English audience. We welcome you, and we welcome your contribution always. So thank you everyone that has been staying with us this Sunday. Happy Easter to all again. And to close our studies for the day, we are going to do our final prayer, and again, wishing you a very good Sunday with your family members. So we invite everyone to elevate their thoughts, uniting their hearts, and to join us in this moment of prayer, where first and foremost, we would like to express our gratitude to our Heavenly Creator, to the Master of Masters, our brother Jesus, and all the benefactors that have been working and assisting us tirelessly during this process of collective trial that humanity is going through. May we be able to see beyond the crisis, to understand that all the hurdles, the obstacles that we go through, they happen for a reason. And this reason is always to help us in our process of evolvement. But understanding our weaknesses, we ask for the protection of the good spirits, our guardian angels, that we may open our eyes, the eyes of the immortal spirit, to see beyond the day-to-day lives, and for a moment to be able to glimpse our future as eternal beings. May we, feeling the presence of the benefactors around us, their fraternal embrace, find the strength, find the courage to pursue the path of enlightenment, the only one that will rid us from the chains of unhappiness, of doubts, of negative emotions. May our homes be visited by the love and light of our brother Jesus. And may we all continue in this path and feel the love of our Heavenly Creator.